Hey, welcome back to JG3 Reviews, where we explore the world of fountain pens, ink, and paper. And today, it's an ink day. We are going to be looking at Ferris Wheel Press's Spruce County Post, a really great ink. I used it recently in the review of their Jewel fountain pen, which has been a really enjoyable pen to use. What we want to see in our test today is how it performs on several different kinds and grades of paper. We're going to do a water fastness test to see whether or not you can read what you've written after being caught in a rainstorm or spilling your coffee. And we'll look at dry times and costs and all of that good stuff as we test this ink today. So let's get started and take a closer look at this ink. Now we're going to start with a look at the bottle itself. Sometimes I save this for the end of the review, but I think with Ferris Wheel Press, you kind of have to talk about the elephant in the room before you even get started. I think this is one of those things that either draws people to Ferris Wheel Press or for some maybe keeps them away because it is a very narrow bottle. Just for scale, okay, there's the pen, and that's actually down at the bottom of the bottle, right? If I hold it up here at the top so the perspective is closer to true, you can see that's a very narrow bottle. And so it can be unstable, especially since it's also rounded at the bottom. It's got a flat edge, obviously, but maybe not enough because it's tippy, okay? I get that. It is definitely tippy, and some of you have said that's why you don't use this ink. And I get it, because again, when I was doing a swatch earlier, I really had to be careful. Now, in terms of presentation, which I think is where the emphasis is on this bottle design, it does make a good impression, okay? It's a really cool looking bottle from a presentation point of view. The printing on the front of the bottom is really cool. I think the paper label of the bottle also is a really nice design. And it's certainly easy to get a hold of the cap. That's very practical, right? Just be aware it can be a little bit tipsy. So if you are too, you know, that could be a problem. When you open up the bottle, it's a little bit wider opening than, say, a diamine ink bottle, the little small 30 milliliter bottle. So you're going to be able to get more pens in to fill that up. But again, you're going to have to be careful. That's true of the diamine bottle as well. But you can get at least some more pens in there. It's still, you know, it's pretty narrow. I used a syringe myself. If you're into reusing ink bottles for various craft supplies or things like that, because of the shape, I would think this is one that might make for some pretty interesting projects, but I sure couldn't tell you what those projects would be because I ain't got no idea. Now, as I said, you're going to want to hold firmly to that bottle while you do your swatch test, so I can't hold the paper still. Sorry about that. That's just a practical thing, isn't it? So there's the first swipe. And the second. So it's quite the challenge today. This is the hardest thing I do today. Man, what an easy day this is going to be. Okay, while that dries, let me show you this. You're going to see this same shading, and you can see in those three layers, distinct shading, and you see it in the writing above. Now, I used the Jewel, which is a medium nib, as the pen for this test, and you can see really nice and dark at the crossings and the bottoms of the letters. And at the tops, you have that nice shading. You really see it in the crossing of that T and the downstroke as well. In this P and in this F and the J, you see some really great shading. And that's what I enjoy about this ink. I also enjoy that it is a nice natural color. And even though this is a juniper green, and you can see the difference for sure, I do think it complements it well. You see those greens out in nature all the time, and the shading kind of brings that out even more. I like it. It's a nice evergreen green. And it does perform well here on the Clairefontaine. No issues whatsoever on the other side of the page, and I think that's what we're going to see on most or all of these papers. For example, here with Tomoe River, it is the old Tomoe River, and you can see here again that shading. Writes a little bit broader line on this paper than it did on the Clairefontaine, and so that brings out a little different dynamic. This has been dried for a while, and you can see there again that it dries to a nice natural green. And in case I failed to mention it before, it is made in Canada. Next up is the Irreful paper. I recently reviewed this, have really enjoyed this paper. And you can see here, again, a broader line, no feathering or misbehavior here whatsoever. Really nice shading, and something about the finish of the writing on this paper. It just has a softness to it that I think looks really cool. It is a nice wet ink on this paper, and well behaved. That is actually a hole in the paper from another test. but no problems there whatsoever. Next is Hammermill copy paper, just the stuff you can buy at Walmart, and you still see the shading. You don't always get shading on Hammermill, but we did with this ink. A little bit of a rough edge in a place or two, not what I would call real feathering, but definitely a couple of rough edges in a letter or two, and it dried so quickly that just writing that and smearing, nothing. Just soaked it right up and soaked it right through. This is largely the paper because lots of other inks come through this paper. It didn't bleed through onto the next sheet or anything. There's nothing over here, but definitely ghosted. Then the trusty old Rhodia dot pad. And here again, you have nice shading, a little bit thinner, crisper line than on that last paper. No misbehavior either, and still wetter here as well. Ayush paper usually performs quite well with a variety of inks, and it does here too. Again, we get that broader line. I'm writing very small here, though, so the perspective might seem a little bit different. But nice shading, more to the dark side here, and no misbehavior. Nothing on the other side either. What about the pen and gear notebook from Walmart that's a couple of bucks? I have tons of these because I just love them for whenever I'm brainstorming or writing things that I don't need special presentation or anything like that. I just want a good big piece of paper that's well behaved, and this does the job, does a really good job. And nice crisp lines here, again, with good shading. And this leans more to the light side, especially in the upper half of the letters here where you have more of those crossings of line over line and shorter strokes. You find it wetter and darker, of course. The ink performs well on this paper, no issue on the other side. All right, but what about the big box composition notebooks with paper from Vietnam? Well, it did very well here too. Really good lines, good shading, average wetness compared to the other inks. And this is it right here. No issues whatsoever. All right, so where paper's concerned, this ink is going to perform, I think, quite well. My experience has been good. It's also performed very well in this pen. No dry out issues whatsoever. It's been ready to go every time I've wanted to use the pen, even if it sat 4 days. Now let's look at the dry times. If I'm going to write something, how long do I have to wait to flip the page? 5 seconds. Let's see here. 5 seconds is still going to be wet. That's what 5 seconds is going to be. 15 seconds. And you know that actually is getting dry pretty quickly. 30 seconds. All right, at 30 seconds, that's just nearly dry. Just almost done. We'll go ahead and do the 60 seconds. All right, what about a minute? Yep, minute is dry. So here's been my experience so far. This obviously somewhere between 30 and 60 seconds for a coated paper like Clairefontaine. I would say probably the same for Rhodia. But on uncoated papers, I found 30 seconds and less is all you're going to need for this ink to dry. So I wouldn't call it a fast drying ink, but it's definitely a reasonably quick drying ink. Speaking of dry, we had this water test grid over here, and I want to find out, can this ink hold my writing to where I can at least make out what I wrote if by some horrible accident I end up with water, coffee, tea, whatever on my document. We're going to put some water on here. Oh, wow. Well, I guess we're going to really put this to the test. Did not mean to do that much, but it is what it is. I'm not redoing the grid. We'll come back to that here in a minute, and we'll see just how well it does or does not hold on to what I've written. All right. Certainly I would hope that if I had a mess, I would clean it up faster than what I'm doing right here. This would be a good test, a challenge for the ink. Let's see. I'm just going to dab that up. Try not to smear anything. And guess what? That's a disappearing ink. I've been having a lot of this kind of result lately, haven't I? That's a disappearing ink. I mean, I can tell barely that says water. I can tell that says test. I might be able to salvage what it was that I said. It's not quite that bad, although you notice there are a couple of places here where the line of the grid is absolutely completely gone. So there's a really good chance that if water spills on what you write, there's no salvaging it, and you won't be able to see what it is. That's pretty typical of a lot of inks, frankly, unless you're using an ink that's specified to be documental. You almost need to assume this is the result you'll get, and then, if you get a better result, bonus. because a lot of inks just don't have water resistance. Does mean, though, this is going to be an easy ink to clean out of your pen most likely, and for a lot of people, that might be a higher priority. I know for myself, I still mail things. I mail letters and cards, and I will write letters and cards in inks like this with pens like this, but on the outside, on the address, I make sure that that's written in something that's more water fast, because I do want to make sure that it gets there. All right, some of you have been wanting me to do this. This is the chromatography, and this is an interesting one. So this is just, it looks like natural green, a little bit to the dark side, some nice shading. Can't be all that much there. Yellow and blue makes green. We've all seen Ziploc commercials, right? No, there's a lot more going on here. There is both a dark blue, and then you can see an electric light blue in there, and then fading to yellow. Of course, that's where your yellow and blue makes green, right? But then there's this whole orangey rust-colored band and just a hint of pink, which again, we see that quite often, and then that fade to just kind of the washed out bit. That's not at all what you would think you would have from that, and that's why I like to do this. You always find out some interesting color combos that if, for example, you wanted to venture into making your own inks, might surprise you that you need to make in order to get to the shades you want. So I find this one quite an interesting little chromatography. All right, overall, what do I think of the ink? I do like it. Really like the natural color and the shading of the green. It has been well behaved in the pen, well behaved on most papers, and I just like it. I do. I just like it. Now, let's talk about some things. The bottle is 38 milliliters of ink. It's not a big bottle, even though there's a lot of glass there and there's a big cap. It's not a big bottle of ink, and at $22, that means you're paying $17.19 per ounce US. So you do need to consider this a premium priced ink, and you'll want to take that into consideration. Is it a good ink? Yes. Is it expensive for what it is? To a lot of people, it's going to be. But that's going to come down to your own personal situation. It is, I think, an enjoyable ink. If you're giving ink as a gift, maybe you're trying to bring somebody into the fountain pen hobby, or you just want something a little extra special, I think the presentation that they have makes it really cool for gifting. Be a good holiday gift, Christmas gift, something like that, birthday gift, and Mother's Day gift. I think for that extra presentation is pretty cool. And I'm sure the Canadians out there in the audience are really happy to have something that's homegrown and high quality because, we all like that, don't we? All right, what do you think? What's your favorite Ferris Wheel Press ink? Is there another shade that some of us might ought to consider? Is there a better green that you like from their catalog? What do you think? Share all that in the comments below. And as always, thank you for watching, subscribing, and God bless you and have a wonderful week.